Welcome to Recovery His Way. I'm your host, Tom Reynolds. We're on the campus of His Way here in Huntsville, Alabama, and today I'm joined by a good friend of mine, Matt Norman. Matt, welcome to our program.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Matt has served in a lot of different capacities, obviously been a resident here, and also serves as a campus leader here on campus, helping to manage and direct our logistics and manage the program at certain times, and also lives on campus and manages the guys and oversees the house and all that type of stuff. So your life's been pretty integrated with this for the last few years. I guess we've known each other for about 4.5 years. We originally met in 2016.
Right.
And you've graduated twice the year, so you've done 2 years completely in the program. So I'm interested in just kind of beginning by just kind of sharing with the audience kind of your recovery story. What brought this about? Where are you at today? What kind of has happened?
Yeah, so I grew up in Madison. I have 3 sisters and a brother. They all went to college. I went to Bob Jones. I grew up in Boy Scouts. I'm an Eagle Scout. I played baseball. I ran cross country in high school. And somewhere along the way, I started using drugs.
How'd you get into drugs? I mean, how'd that somewhere along the way happen?
It's weird. I was thinking about this today. My stepsister was really good at school, and there was nothing I was really good at, but I loved the Doors. And I thought that if I could be like Jim Morrison, I could be a rock star. So I had this obsession with drugs and with that lifestyle before I even used. And then when I started using, I never stopped. I was very awkward, or I thought I was awkward. And I didn't feel like I fit in at school. I felt like the kids were always laughing at me or making fun of me. And maybe they were, I don't know. But and drugs kind of took that away. And so I could pretend to be a rock star, at least in my own mind, or something like that. But eventually it became a maintenance thing. It became a way to cope with any situation and any emotion.
So this starting, would this start, how old were you when all this started? When did you want to be Jim Morrison?
I was like 11 or 12.
Okay.
Yeah. I wasn't that good at baseball, and I didn't make good grades. And that seemed like a good way to go. My parents thought it was ridiculous, of course. And then, so I realized it was rebellious, and that made it even better. Yeah, like 11 or 12, but I didn't really start using until about 15. It's really hard that's when I could find drugs.
When you entered the using and stuff like that, what did you start with?
Marijuana. Actually, no, that's not true. I started with beer because my grandma had it in her basement, and I could always go down into her basement and grab beer. They had pills and stuff, and my sister always had pills, but I never got into those. Later, I would get pills from medicine cabinets and things. But at first it was just beer, and I would like take a couple beers and go to the lake or the pond behind my house. And it was more just like, oh, I'm doing the beer thing. You know, I didn't even catch a buzz so much. But once I started smoking pot, I never quit.
Okay. All right.
Until maybe a few years ago. Until I came here. Yeah.
Right. So you started that process. What happened? Okay, so where'd your journey take you?
Yeah, my mom died when I was young, and she had been divorced. I had a stepdad who I'd never related to, so there were all these other complications. And so when my mom died,
how old were you when that happened?
I was 15.
Okay.
When I really started using drugs, and so that was the only way I really knew to cope with that. And the idea of coping with it never even entered my head. It was just like that was the reaction to it. Mm-hmm. My stepdad at the time had adopted me, and he remarried shortly after. But I just kept using. I had no plans to go to college or do anything. I was just gonna do drugs, I guess was my only plan. I went to a lot of concerts, and I think I had ambitions there. Like I would graduate high school and maybe sell burritos at a concert or something. That was the entirety of my plan.
Okay.
Yeah.
So where'd all that take you eventually?
I stumbled into a career in restaurants, and that worked out. And I got married somehow.
You don't remember?
I say somehow. I mean, I remember the details, but like I didn't really have anything to offer. But I got married, and Of course, I got divorced. Along the way, I started using opiates, and that just became very problematic. I mean, marijuana wasn't good, but I didn't have to steal or anything to get it, you know? I didn't. Opiates are bad. And I eventually got fired from my job for stealing money from the safe. I got divorced, and all those bad things happened. And I thought it was the end of the world. I thought it was rock bottom. And that's when I stumbled into church and met Ted from Asbury.
Now, why would you have gone to Asbury? Why?
So I actually went to Asbury because the doors at AA were locked, and I grew up at Asbury, and I hated it. I just went and I played with my GI Joes, and I don't know why I hated it, but I wanted to be watching cartoons, and my parents made me get up early and put on clothes and all these things. And I just wanted to watch cartoons, so I really resented it. But I paid attention and I knew the stories, but I guess part of me knew that they cared. I quit going when I was like 16. As soon as I could drive, I quit going, and I hadn't been back. The doors at AA were locked. That was really the deal. And I called my old father-in-law and asked him for advice, and he told me that the only thing that could help me was Jesus. So I said, "Oh, okay, I'll go to church," and that's where I went. And I ended up here after that.
Why would you reach out to your former father-in-law? That seems like an odd.
It is odd. I respected him, and I had burned every bridge I had. Every bridge. My parents went and talked to me. I see my parents, my stepdad. My sister had tried to help me. I had burned her. Everybody was burned. My employer, he had just fired me.
How old were you at this time? We walked in as
33, okay. 34.
Okay, so it's like 30 years, or 15 years of...
Yeah, of daily use. Mm-hmm. Well, near daily. I mean, I didn't, as much as I could afford. And Ted was the only person who would have anything to do with me. And the fact that he let me live with him was a big deal for me. It's kind of where I realized the love of Jesus. Because my dad and my ex-mother-in-law and all these people were like, "Don't let this guy in your house," And it wasn't because I would have robbed them, right? I would have just stolen stuff. And I think I did during that time too. I've apologized to him since, of course.
I mean, it's a pretty bold move for Ted to invite you into his house for a month while you're on a waiting list to come here.
Yeah.
Because I understood, he has kids and stuff like that. This isn't just him, like a bachelor apartment. This is a family.
Right. He had 2 high school age daughters. His wife was there. Ted's a big guy, though. He's like linebacker big. So I don't think he was worried about too much. But I thought it was reckless. I thought it was crazy. It's like, what? Mm-hmm. And of course, I proceeded to use him in any way I could. And he knew it. He knew it the whole time, but he just wanted to get me here. Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay, so fast forward, he gets you here. What happens?
Well, he got me here, and so Ted had laid this foundation for me about what a Christian is and looks like, right? That kind of reckless love, but still not too reckless, right? And then you guys, Stuart, the classes here kind of solidified that. It made it more permanent, and it made it, I don't know, it built structure on that foundation, right? I had the emotional side, the touchy side, but it gave me, like, I had heard all these stories growing up in church. Like, I grew up in church, but here made them speak to me in a way that they were relevant, right? It wasn't this guy in a fancy coat who gets beaten by his brothers or something, right? It was something that was relevant, and so yeah, it spoke to me, and I got baptized, but I still had to relapse and come back. Well, no, I didn't have to, but I did.
Well, tell us about that. So when you were here the first time, what do you think you gained? You obviously graduated and you left, right. And then a few months later you come back. So walk us through that. What did you feel like you gained in your first time? What happened that relapse happened? What prompted you to come back?
Yeah, I think the first time I was here, I gained all the tools that I needed. I gained all the knowledge that I needed to live without drugs. I just did not decide to apply them or like to plug them in, right? I just kind of carried them around in a backpack or something. And I don't know why. I believed, but I didn't believe such that I wanted to live differently. Maybe you could say I didn't believe. But I think I wanted both worlds. I wanted to still get whatever I wanted from people and this and all that, but be forgiven at the same time and be, and that didn't work out well at all. I had an easy run here my first time at His Way, but as soon as I left, I relapsed. And looking back, I set myself up for it the whole time, because I tried to keep one foot in both of those worlds.
What ways were you keeping feet in the world? I mean, what does that look like practically?
So for one thing, for me, it was mostly telling people what they wanted to hear. I knew the right things to say. I could sound like I was doing the right thing, but in the back of my head, I'm like, man, I wonder if this drug dealer will still remember me if I ever need to reach out to him, right? I kind of dip my toes in the water like that, like, oh, I just need to send him a text to make sure. There was a guy I owed a lot of money to, and I kept that in my back pocket and didn't tell anybody. I could have told you, and you could have been like, okay, I'll have Jeremy Mitchell go pay him or something, right? But I didn't, because I wanted that in my back pocket. Like, well, I gotta pay this guy, knowing that I would buy something when I got there. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of reading the Bible and praying, but at the same time, still kind of wanting to use. Mm-hmm. I don't know why. I don't know if I ever really wanted to use, but I did. And I think I do what I want to do.
Well, at least wanted a lifestyle that using would become a part of it in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I think I wanted to use successfully, right? Like maybe go to work and pay the bills and still have the recreation of using. Unfortunately for me, that line of recreation to an entirely different thing was crossed years ago. Mm-hmm. Right. Years ago, and there's no going back in my case.
So once you're out, you graduate 1 year, you go out, you relapse fairly quickly afterwards. Yeah. What just made you decide to come back? Why come back? What happened the second go round?
When I left and relapsed, I knew immediately that I should have never left, because I left not because I wanted to go out and help people or live a successful life. I left because I wanted more freedom, less accountability, that kind of thing. And that's not really the right reason. I mean, it could be a reason, but it shouldn't be the reason to leave here. Mm-hmm. And I thought that I had hit this rock bottom thing before I came here the first time. I'd lost everything, I thought. But when I relapsed, I'd set up visitation with my daughter before I graduated. And when I relapsed, all that went away. And I realized that this whole rock bottom thing is really kind of a myth, that there's no such thing, in my opinion. And it's just like, you just either kind of survive or you don't, right? And so rock bottom, I think I realized would be me, passing away or something. And so I kind of decided either I wanted, to continue down that road or not. And I knew that the only way to not would be to come back here. Mm-hmm. And I kind of got over this whole performance-based thing with Jesus, right? I had to act a certain way. Even in the midst of all that, I knew that he still loved me. But it got scary to realize that I could turn my back on that. Mm-hmm. And that the only rock bottom would be for me to turn my back on that and then die of drugs.
Right.
Or stealing somebody's $20 heater, and getting shot for it or something. That'd be bad. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I came back and I wanted to, I didn't care about the rules, the freedoms, or the accountability or anything like that. I didn't want to die.
You're a smart guy. I've known you for a while, and you're very intelligent and very resourceful. You went through this program. I know you were a good student at the program the first time. You gained a lot of information. You come back into the program. It's not like we do it different for you the second time. It's the same classes, basically, the same teachers, the same material, the same books that you're reading through. What made it different second time? Or was it different at all? Was it just part two?
The program was absolutely the same. I made it a point to kind of tell on myself when I came back. I think I sat down with you at one point and I said, I had done this thing and that thing when I was here the first time, and that was important to me. I didn't get a phone the whole year, the second year I was here, because I didn't want any kind of contact, not with people, but with portals to the outside world, right? just all those things. And I started going to school. I realized that the blessing of the freedom I had, right? I mean, it's like the point of being saved wasn't necessarily to not die, but to live in that freedom and that grace and all that. And I wanted to take full advantage of that. So I said, well, I got to do something big. So I started going to school, and that was big for me. It gave me goals and taught me how to fulfill those goals, break them up into smaller goals, and how to stay dedicated to a thing. You know, that first year I was here, it's like, whoa, a lifetime of sobriety. What are you talking about? Like, I haven't thought a week in advance in the last 20 years, you know? And so yeah, the second year taught me to do that. Mm-hmm. So school was a big part of that. And I decided that I wasn't going to leave. I decided that whatever I did here, I would just stay. I mean, whatever job I had, whatever silly rules, not silly rules, there are no, whatever I had to do, I was going to do.
Why stay here? Well, is it just because you want to live in the bubble?
Yeah, that was a part of it for sure. Absolutely. At first, mm-hmm. I think I was kind of scarred and frightened after that relapse. So yeah, that was part of it. I was scared to go to school, and I was scared to have to work and have an apartment and go to school and all these things. Mm-hmm. So staying here helped with that. I got over it eventually. I went to New Haven for a writers conference that one summer, and taking flights and trains and all that stuff kind of broke me out of that. I realized, you know, I can kind of do this. And now it's not because of a bubble. It's because this is the community I live in. Mm-hmm.
I guess I'm interested too, and because I think this idea of connection and community is such an important part of sobriety and recovery. How has this become a community for you, and what does it mean that it's a community?
Right. I never had a community before. My mom died when I was young, and before that it was just, you know, step parents and a lot of things. So even in my house felt kind of, I used to say, an orphanage. I hope they're not listening now. You know, please forgive me. But and in school I was so isolated, purposefully. You know, it's not that the people hated me. I felt so awkward that I would always be by myself. I spent all my nights reading in my room. So Scouts was the closest thing to a community I'd had before this. Once I started drugs, I always used alone. In fact, in secret most of the time. I would hide it from my wife or my girlfriend. So this place was the first place that I did experience community in a way that forced me to get along with other people or to be a part of other people, to share things. That's not true. I've lived in ski resorts and stuff. I'm used to sharing things, but that's different. This is different. A community that people have to see me when I'm angry, or when I say mm-hmm. something wrong to somebody. I have to deal with the consequences, and I have to either apologize, ignore them. That doesn't work out very well, so usually apologize. But I'm forced to deal with the consequences, right? There's no hiding. There's no room to retreat to. There's no sanctuary. So it's a community in that sense, but it's also a forgiving community that accepts that and is more interested in where we go from here. Mm-hmm. Right? So everybody's kind of growing together, mm-hmm. Staff, residents, everybody. So it's a community for me in all of that sense.
Well, I think one of the things you said that I think is really interesting is we're kind of in a culture today in which we kind of build these artificial communities that we can escape from whenever we want to. You know, right. We have kind of these kind of very superficial communities, and we can retreat from them. We don't have to attend them. We can even Zoom them if we need to. So it requires very little. But that this community has become an intimate community to you because you've had to wrestle with your foibles and your failures and your difficulties and embrace those things together and not run away from them, not flee them, not hide from them, but have to kind of proceed through them.
Right, yeah, I'm absolutely forced to. I'm not forced to in the sense that I could live somewhere else, but that's one of the main reasons I choose to live here. Mm-hmm. That's kind of become the thing that's been the most important part to me, is the community.
I mean, I've known you well during this time, and one of the things I've seen, and we've talked a lot about, I think has been an important part of your journey, is that when you've had these tendencies to retreat from things, whether it be into reading or in your room or just run away, you've continued to come back to this. I got to re-engage this, and these are sometimes very uncomfortable things. Intimate personal relationships have not been your strong suit,
right.
And yet you've had to kind of work through those. And I've been proud of the way that you've managed those things. You got bumps and bruises along the way in the process, but I think it's helped you kind of solidify this well-rounded sobriety.
Right.
That I think you've worked on well, which I think is great.
Right. You asked earlier about recovery, and I said there's nothing I particularly do for recovery. I think my life, I tried to make it where there's no compartmentalized aspects of it, right? Such that I do my recovery on this night, and I do my community on this night. Everything's kind of wound together.
Right.
And this last school year made that even more so. I mean, I had to do school here too. Right.
All right. With COVID, right?
Yeah.
You didn't get to run away to school every day.
Right.
So you've stayed here, obviously, and you've served in various capacities here, which we appreciate, and you've done a great job. When you look now at this kind of 3, I guess, consecutive years of sobriety you've had, what are the things in place for you that kind of support that lifestyle? What are the things that you're doing actively to say this kind of, not necessarily to say that I'm keeping myself from drinking today, but just kind of the things that support this new mindset, this new perspective? What are the things that you're actively doing?
So I really don't do much thinking about it, but I realize I do a lot. I never think about recovery very much. I do because I work in a recovery center, but in my own personal life, I never think like, oh, I'm doing this thing for recovery. Like the biggest thing for me is structure. I wake up and I make my bed, and I have a routine, and I do that same exact routine every day, whether I'm here or somewhere else.
Was that the same things you did before you came, though?
Absolutely not. No,
really?
I mean, like before, even my first few months, the second time at his way. I mean, like if I had a job at 7 a.m, I'd wake up at like 6:59, or whatever,
right?
And brush. Sometimes wouldn't even brush my teeth, and I'd get to work, and my relationships would be horrible because it would take me about 2 hours to wake up. Everything, like if I had a bill, due, I wouldn't even remember the bill was due until after I had spent all my money on drugs, and then it's like, oh man, the heat,
Right.
Someone's got to pay the heat. Right. But now it's very different. Like if even with school, like if I have a syllabus, I take it at the beginning of the semester and write every single assignment down, and I know ahead of time I have this thing due and that thing due. And that's important.
Is that? I mean, because one of the things about the program I think is significant is that there is structure, that people come from an unstructured situation into a structured situation, and that helps kind of support this new life. And then when they leave, unfortunately, in many cases, they don't take the structure with them. Right. They don't imply those things. And so then as soon as they're outside of his way, it kind of goes back to the unmade bed and the disheveled kind of life and that kind of thing. Why have you chosen to keep the structure in? Because of some interpersonal kind of feels better to me, or is it one of those disciplines I've kind of maintained because I believe it helps support my life? What's the motivation there?
It's both, for sure. A lot of it has to do with I want to live a transparent life that the guys that live here can look at and say, well, he's doing the same things we are, to an extent. Another part is that it works, and I know what happens if I don't do that. When I left here, when I realized, I immediately went back to my old lifestyle, and then everything else just came after that. Because it's also habitual, and the drugs were responses to certain stimuli. So you put that stimuli back in, and of course the drugs are going to come, right?
Right.
So the structure is absolutely important, and I guess I kept it because I had built up so much momentum doing it that stopping was uncomfortable in a way, but also because I believe that those things work. I tell guys often that we don't do very much here in terms of what we do, but the structure we offer and the accountability we offer is kind of the fundamental tenets of the program outside of Christ, right?
Right. I would agree. Over this period of time, I realize you've been here. However, that doesn't mean that temptations and things aren't still a part of the recovery experience. Obviously, we see about 50% of the guys who are on the property here leave for various reasons because they fall to that temptation. What kind of threats have you kind of faced during the time you've been here, and how have you managed those situations?
Right. For me, I've found that the most threatening things are kind of little incidents. It seems intuitive that it would be, divorce or a child being taken or something like that. But in my experience, those things have driven me more toward an accountability system or support and not away from it. Whereas getting in an argument with somebody will drive me more toward the other end of the spectrum, right? And so I think that a lot of guys have that same experience. I think that you get in an argument with your wife or your girlfriend or your employer, they accuse you of something and it hits some soft spot you have, and just out of instinct or habituation, you want to use. And that's been the biggest threat for me.
Okay. I mean,
right? Like if my pride hurts.
Okay.
My pride gets hurt, or an argument, right?
Right. Okay, that's good. I mean, it's one of the things that we obviously try to work on here is, and Scripture gives a lot of guidance on, is how to manage conflict, right? How do you love people? How do you persevere with people? How do you overcome conflicts, and how do you love one another through those difficult times and bear one another's burdens and all these kind of things? So learning how to resolve conflict becomes an important thing. And I think one of the things that you're pointing out there is, I think many times people think of a relapse as you go out and stick a needle in your arm, but it's more of relapsing in those not managing conflicts well, having interpersonal tensions, not maintaining the discipline. All of a sudden I kind of say, oh good, I'm out of his way, I don't have to make my bed anymore, I don't have to get him to do devotional and those kind of things, and all of a sudden,
and those are the things that were keeping you sober in the first place, right? To an extent, right? I mean, making your bed doesn't keep you sober, but it's the structure that you build, it's the routine,
right? And how important that is. I know one of the things for you has been education. Right. You came here and you've alluded to it already, the education process. I guess two things I'd like to ask here. One, if you could kind of describe exactly what are the specifics. I mean, did you start in high school education? Did you start in your PhD when you got here? I mean, what's been your educational training? And secondly, how do you think education has contributed to your sobriety?
Right. My education path, I did graduate high school. I tried to do college once or twice before I came to his way, but it was this thing where I was just trying to make my parents not think I was a drug addict or something, or my girlfriend at the time, and I failed miserably. But when I came here the second time, I just wanted to go to school. I didn't want to. I was working in a box factory, and that just wasn't for me. I'm sweating now. I was sweating miserably then. It was too much. And school seemed like a good deal. I'd thought about it a lot. So I started going to Calhoun. I just registered and took some classes.
Which is the community college.
The community college, yeah. They take anybody. That's funny, I'm just saying they do, right? They took me. Right. And I just found it very pleasurable, to learn and to write. And that was my job. So quickly I wanted to, the kind of the addict side of me, right? I got to do more and more and more. So I kept going, and I transferred to UAH, and I'll be a senior this year. Me and a bunch of 20-year-olds went down.
Okay, so you're getting onto how's school gone for you? Have you struggled through it? Is it gone well?
It's gone really well, and I think the thing is so school for me, I approach it almost as something I enjoy. No, that's exactly how I approached it. It's something I enjoy, right? Some people say, oh yeah, treat it like a job. I don't even think like that. I've worked plenty of jobs, and I dreaded that.
You can't seem to treat it like a hobby.
Yeah, it's almost like a hobby for sure. It's going really well. Yeah, it's a passion. It's going well. I do philosophy, and I just read and write a lot, reading is something I've always loved to do, and writing is fun. But it's neat. You got to talk about all these big-headed ideas and things.
How has that contributed in your mind to your sobriety? How does education, how do those two things work together?
I think the most direct impact education has had on my sobriety is that it's taught me how to plan and how to do things, right? So when I started going to Calhoun, I had the idea, one day I'll be a professor and teach something. little did I know how far off that was, right? And so I learned how to take it a semester at a time and a class at a time, and furthermore, an exam at a time, right? And so every little thing I do, if I just have to read an assignment and write an essay on it, I think of it as like, that's the thing that I have to do, right? I have to do this 110%, and I want to get as good a grade on it as I can and do as good a job as I can. And I do that with every little thing, and it's kind of carried over into my other life. I think it's all one life. There's no other life. But, you know, if I clean my room, it's kind of the same thing. It's right. It's like, that's the thing I'm doing now.
Right.
And I need to do it 100%, and I need to clean my room well. I'm hoping it'll kind of trickle down into personal relationships someday. We're getting there, you know?
Okay.
That's the hard part.
So as you look toward your future, obviously you're here right now. You're applying to graduate school, I know. What passions, visions do you currently have as you envision your ongoing recovery journey?
Right. I haven't thought specifically about recovery journey. I know generally I have two things that are weighing heavily on my mind. One is that I'd like to be a professor. The idea of spending 8 more years in school, while that sounds great, it also means that I'd be quite old on the job market. That's maybe the worst in the country. And that's kind of scary. I do want to go to graduate school, and I'm actively pursuing that right now. And I'd like whatever I do academically to revolve around recovery, addiction, faith. I'd like to get involved in some larger social issues. Incarceration's a big topic for me. Whatever I do, I'd still like to be involved in this work on some level, whether it's the only work I do or whether it's something I volunteer with on certain nights. Yeah, I don't ever want to stop doing this recovery thing. And by that, I mean working in it, not necessarily as a personal growth thing.
Right. Okay.
So more education for sure. That's been a good deal. So I don't want to stop that.
That's good. I mean, I think it's really been exciting to watch your growth and your maturity through the education process. And I think one of the things that happens with education too is that it kind of changes one's trajectory for their life. You know, before in addiction, it was like what restaurant management was kind of my ceiling there.
Yeah.
And now you've kind of broken through that, and it's reordered your world in some ways. It's trained your mind to think differently, so you view life differently. And it's really out of that how I view life and how I respond to it that my addiction comes from anyway. So if I'm seeing and dealing with life differently, addiction kind of becomes, and the response of that kind of becomes an irrelevant response at the point that I've changed that perspective.
That's, you know, I think with addiction, and our friend Doug says this all the time, right? You have to change everything and learn new stuff. And I think that's very true. I think of like, if you're a baseball player and someone throws a ball at you, you're either going to swing or try to catch it, right? And addiction's the same way. If I re-enter certain circumstances or situations, I'm usually going to react in the way that I've trained myself to do so. So if I can create a whole nother trajectory,
Right.
It's much easier to stay sober, right? I don't necessarily have to think about staying sober. It's just
Well, I've enjoyed our journey together, and I've enjoyed your being a part of it, and look forward to continue to do so. I guess the last question I wanted to ask as we close is, you know, some people may be listening to this or watching today who have been afraid to enter it. You know, they're kind of before you met Ted kind of situation. What would you say to yourself, or what would you say to them while they're kind of out there struggling with what's my next step?
Right. I'd say you have to take a step. I understand that it's daunting, it's terrifying. You know, addicts, we're not thinking more than the next dose away. I don't remember what we used to say, dose. But you're thinking in short time spans like that. So the idea of spending a week sick or 6 months in a recovery center, that's just not going to happen. But you have to. And the thing is there's help for everybody, and you certainly can get better, and those feelings go away after no time, really, in my experience. I would say don't wait for some kind of rock bottom thing to happen, because I don't think that that's what anybody wants, and it changes. So if you want to get sober, then do it. You're going to need help. And so maybe stumble into a church or something, or,
Okay.
or stumble into his way.
Right.
I see that happen often, right? Just
Right.
come in the front door.
Right.
Or it's 2021, so you can just get on the website. You don't even have to go anywhere. You can be isolated and do it.
Okay.
So Google how to get sober, right? and then come to his way.
Right. Right. I think one of the things I think so often it's daunting because it feels like a prison sentence or some kind of I'm going to put myself in this incarcerated situation. But you came maybe with that mindset to some degree, but now you've made it a life for yourself. And so this is maybe in some ways the best part of your life experience. I mean, this hasn't been a penalizing situation. It's been a redemptive and blessed situation, which my friends are here, my freedoms are here, my experiences are here, my whole retooling of my life has been here. And so it's not a terrible experience, it's been a great experience.
Yeah, drugs are the prison, and that's the paradox of it, is they seem freeing, but that's the deceitfulness and the maliciousness of it, is that it seems to free, but really it's binding you tighter the whole time, right? So the thoughts and everything like that aren't normal thoughts. They're skewed thoughts, right? It took me a while to realize what freedom was. It's not being high all the time.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
There's a freedom that Jesus promises, right? That you'll come to know the truth, and the truth will set you free.
That's right.
And that's the ultimate freedom that God designed us for, and that He wants for us. And the world offers all kinds of freedoms. They just tend to just turn the screws a little tighter on our slavery.
Right.
So, well, Matt, I thank you for sharing with us today, and I thank you for the journey that we've been on together over these last few years, and look forward to its future. Thank you for listening and watching today. If you'd like to learn more about His Way, you can check out our website at hiswayinc.org.